Get you up and going out of bed.
Yeah, I don't wanna fall asleep, I don't wanna pass away. I've been thinking of our future cause I'll never see those days. I don't know why this has happened, but I probably deserve it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our 5th episode of We Are the Voice. We have a very special guest. She is the author of Yaki Plus 3, an American account of birthing a lesbian. And obviously, we also have Tina here. So thank you for joining us today in our new studio that's not done yet. And so Tina, if you would like to take care of, would you like to say what you want to say real quick, and then we will dive right into it with Terry's story.
Sure. Hi, guys. I just wanted to introduce, there's a new group out there, the women's group. You can reach her at familycourtsuperheroes.com, or I'm sorry, familycourtsuperhero@outlook.com. What they're doing is they're looking for testimonies for people to combine a documentary with family court and CPS corruption. So she's very reliable. She will contact you within at least 2 to 3 days. She will also send you an email with a PDF for forms for you to fill out. Again, I have reached out to her personally. She's a wonderful person to work with. So I think it's a great idea for us to come together and stand strong in the corruption that we're dealing with right now.
All right, Terry, if you would like to introduce yourself and kind of give us like a brief overview real quick and maybe explain your book a little bit.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I go by Yaki, and I right now am in New England. However, it's a 93-degree day, so if I start sweating or disappear from the screen, I've probably passed out. You may want to send the National Guard in. It's very hot, abnormally so for this region. But today was Juneteenth, and I went to 2 different Juneteenth festivals to celebrate the reality that sometimes laws are made, great laws meant to help people and protect people, but not everyone obeys them. So we understand that with Juneteenth, we learn through this particular holiday that there are laws in place that are not always followed. And we understand that with family court, there are also a lot of ambiguous laws that come out to basically be the opinion of some third party looking in on a very bad situation. In my book, I start with the sad part of the story. I start with learning in a court of law that my biological daughter and my 2 adopted sons had been sold to someone who had thrown me out of my home only 3 years earlier. And it never occurred to me in the midst of those 3 years that that would ever happen, because it just didn't make sense. I knew that there were laws in place to protect domestic violence victims. And since my case falls under coercive control, it just never occurred to me that this actually could happen. And it took me quite a while to adapt to the changes and to recognize that I was just one of thousands of people in this country who have to deal with a system that's in place and is seemingly set in place to help people, but not everyone follows the laws. And we haven't yet seen our Juneteenth. When I wrote the book, I started with the sad part of the story, and then I backtracked and told little vignettes of my life that led up to the part of that story where all of that happened. And I'll be honest with you, the book is a trauma dump. I've had people who know me personally and said that is a very hard book to read. And I can't say that it's going to be an easy read for anyone else. It is my story, and it covers being a religious mission worker overseas, working in a third world country and holding AIDS orphans while they died. It includes miscarriage. It includes being abused and sexually harassed while I was in the military because I'm gay. And back then, don't ask, don't tell basically made LGBTQ personnel the scapegoat for any homophobic leadership that should never have been leadership in the first place. So all of that led me to a relationship that wasn't even legally recognized as marriage at the time that my 2 foster sons were adopted by the 2 of us, and my biological daughter was born to me. And I still cannot figure out how the Supreme Court ruling backtracked the marriage to the point that someone could actually take my own biological child when they weren't recognized as married. And I still have the original birth certificate of my baby girl who was born 7 years ago. And I was the only one listed because I was the only legal parent when she was born. The book doesn't really have a happy ending, and it's hard to read. But what I try to do in that is show, as a firm believer in a God and a creator, is that if we can live in a closeness with our creator and a oneness with the creation around us, that we can find a way to have peace amidst the storm.
No, that's very inspirational. You're definitely an inspiration. I know you've had some struggles within the family court system, and obviously we use that term pretty loosely.
And I don't use that term because I've never seen families go in there. I've only seen a lot of brokenness. I've seen a lot of hatred. I've seen a lot of vindictive behavior. So we could use broken families at best. And I'm not sure that it counts as a court system because there's no system. You can have two people see the same judge with the same circumstance in the same state, and yet there's two very, very different situations just based on what the judge's opinion is and mood is that day. So when I refer to that system, I say the broken family corporation, because it's a corporation that's self-sustaining and self-preserving. And sure, the word court is in there, but ultimately it's a corporation and they're there to protect themselves and their job.
You're right. It's just a paycheck, it seems, unfortunately. And it's sad because it seems as if it defies the whole purpose of, keeping family oriented and structure. And it's not teaching our children anything, but, just to be traumatized and not be able to seek out the proper resources, say, in their near future when they're looking for help. There's not a lot of resources for domestic violence victims either. If the CPS is involved or the family court's involved, those people seek help, and it seems as if they're demoralized and treated as criminals, when they're seeking help. So I think your book sounds absolutely empowering, not only from a woman's point of view, but from being in the situation you were in, because it seems like all aspects of your life has been affected traumatically. And it seems, I would love to see your link if you can when we're done, maybe post it and then we can just share it throughout, many groups, because I think it will help a lot. And like I was telling Brandon earlier, people need to understand that their testimonies alone will help others come out of the woodwork. And that's what we need, is to build with each other so we can help with this reform and help maybe get other people's children back, You're
and
awesome.
Thank you. I don't consider myself to be awesome, but I do consider myself to be a person of faith. And that has a lot to do with my story, because I don't know how people go through this if they don't have a spiritual relationship that allows them to speak to someone or something. Because I would have gone batshit crazy. Sorry if I'm not supposed to say shit, but,
okay.
But then I said it again. Okay.
It's all good.
We're adults here. We can handle it.
I've said way worse on the air about actual government officials, so you're okay.
Well, I'm a chaplain by training, and a lot of people will hear me talk, and they're like, I never knew that preachers could curse. I was like, well, if preachers were
It seems as if people have a different outlook on religious people. Like, I get the same thing. I believe in God and the Bible, and I'm full faithful, through everything. But I smoke cigarettes, unfortunately. I'm a sinner. We're all sinners, unfortunately, still. We're not perfect. And I'm not saying that it's okay. But, some people just have a different outlook. And I guess when they hear something like that, it's like, hold on, wait a minute. You're religious. You're not supposed to do any of that stuff.
The truth of the matter is we are all fallible humans, and we all make mistakes. And I try to keep that in mind when I start talking about my story and all that I went through, because I understand that a judge is in a really precarious situation. They have to hear a story, sometimes without hearing a story, because you've got at least one person, if not both people involved, who are laced with trauma and fear, and they're confused because they're in a situation, in a setting that they've never been in before. And I think that's part of the problem. It's not just that this corporation is existing to make decisions for third parties, but I don't feel like my story was ever truly told. And it wasn't until 22 months after I was thrown out of my home that I stood before a judge. I was petrified. I actually used the last bottom dollar of credit and savings that I had to buy a court monkey, which is what I call the attorneys, to talk for me. And she literally didn't know the story. She had no idea what I had been through. She had no idea the situations that led to the two of us having children in the first place. Was it a relationship between my former spouse and I? Yes, it was, but it wasn't what most people think of when they think of a same-sex relationship. We had agreed on many facets of our relationship and of our parenting, and it was agreed upon before the baby son came in as a foster child that I would be his full-time caregiver, at least until he was mandatory school age. And that was carried over when that child and another boy was adopted the same summer that my daughter was conceived. I looked straight at her and said, I'm not creating a child to cause pain. I need to know you're in this for the long haul. She looked me square in the eye and said that she wasn't going anywhere. I forgot to ask her if she was going to actually kick me out. But the truth of the matter is there were so many facets, and that's very, very true of same-sex relationships. Many facets of our parenting are actually agreed upon. It's verbal agreement, and it should be contractual. I didn't at that time understand what a prenuptial was, excuse me, and I didn't understand the difference between a verbal agreement and going to an attorney and a judge and having it drawn up and written up. Because if I had known that, I would have done that. It was that important to me, and she knew that. She knew when we started a relationship, it was for the purpose of establishing a family, and she wanted to end a generational problem that existed with her family name of abandonment and spousal abuse. And I thought, you know what? That's the one thing I want. I don't want just to carry on my family name, which is full of people who keep their promise and take care of their children. I wanted actually to help her join that type of legacy. So when she said she wanted to go to school, because apparently 2 master's degrees and 2 other bachelor's degrees just wasn't enough for her, we had to move out of state. And I didn't catch, in the midst of some legitimate marital and relationship and parenting conflicts, I didn't catch that when we moved out of state, that was actually a strategy on her part to get me away from the advantages that I held in a supposedly mother-centric court system. So when she said I had to leave, I had just started working for the first time in 4 or 5 years. I'd been a full-time caregiver the whole time. I had no education, certainly not 4 degrees to fall back on. And though I was discharged honorably through the Air Force, my coding fit many don't ask, don't tell survivors and looked similar to an escapee from Leavenworth. You couldn't get a job when they decide that you don't get to serve in the military. I couldn't be a mailman because that's a government job. The coding is what catches a lot of us. So I'd struggled for many years with employment. I couldn't go to school. I didn't have the money. And even when I signed up for community college classes, she couldn't be bothered to stay home long enough to take care of the children so I could take 1 class. So when she threw me out, I had little to nothing to stand on. And one of the shelters I had befriended some of the workers at, she flat out told me, she said, you don't want to end up here. You need to do everything you can to get on your feet, get your own place, because if you end up here, you will lose your children. Most of my mothers lose their children because the judge will decide that you're not worthy enough to raise children if you cannot afford housing. Now keep in mind, this was in the DC metro, which is a very, very expensive place to live.
Yeah.
Northern Virginia is expensive. The housing, in fact, was so expensive that they wouldn't even give me tours of the housing until they saw my income, my proof of income, which I didn't have because I'd only been working for 2 months. Long story short, I found the place that was in Alexandria, but not in the city. It was in a different county. And it was a miracle. I said, the guy asked me, the landlord said, how are you going to pay for this? I said, well, here's what I've done for the last 2 months. Here's my plan. And he said, I'll give you a chance. And he gave me a chance. And I'll give you the honest truth. It is a miracle. It doesn't make any sense. I started driving for Uber because she had forced me to buy a nice car right before this move. And now I realize why. Because I needed that car, and I started working for Uber. And while I didn't make a lot of money as a full-time caregiver of a preschooler, a kindergartner, and an early middle schooler, I did make enough to pay rent. And a lot was charged through those years, but I never got evicted. And that in and of itself is a miracle.
No, and that's awesome. And that's one of those things, and I say all the time in my life, like, things will just work out. I'm just one of those people, like, things just work out. And I truly believe if you're a good person and you honestly give it your all, things just work out. Maybe not 100%, but in that situation, you were able to pay your rent. And obviously it takes a turn somewhere because because that's what led you here and to your book, obviously, which, by the way, I really do want to read, and I am going to buy this week.
Well, get a box of tissues, buddy.
It seems through her premeditated antics, you were able to, through the struggle, pull yourself out of, without even knowing, I'm pretty sure it's still very emotional, though. And still very hard to deal with, the drastic,
It is.
life and decisions that were made basically on somebody else. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have a tactic. When I'm telling my story, I'm not telling my story, I'm telling a story. I'm telling the story as if I were someone else telling a story. If I don't put myself in that situation and the emotions of what I felt, I can actually get through this. But it's taken me 4+ years to get to the point where I can actually do that. It takes a lot of practice. We didn't get to court for 22 months after the date that she kicked me out. And I thought, you know what? This is what she wants. She wants to throw me out. She wants a different person. She wants a job that she's decided doesn't fit with our relationship. And though none of that was actually true, I couldn't fight for a relationship that was one-sided because it always had been. And I began to realize that through the years. I began to realize the number of times that I washed and folded laundry to be criticized for not doing it a certain way, or being accused because of her weight gain, because I had cooked the meal, packed the meal, and sent the meal. Obviously, I was the problem for the weight gain. And I just began to realize a lot of these types of issues and the way the money was spent, the way the money was controlled, the way the money was very, very one-sided. I began to realize a lot of the sacrifices I had made weren't necessarily for the family. They were because of the family. So by the time we got to court, I was thinking, certainly I'll find a way to tell this story. The problem is the court monkey I had hired didn't know the story, and she couldn't tell the story, and she didn't object to anything. There was so much in the end of 2 days. My head was swimming. I literally felt like I had been thrown out of an airplane and was hurling toward the ground. I had no idea what was going on. They allowed my 2 younger children to live full-time with me, but she was given authority to choose their schools, which was, of course, to oppose the agreements we had made repeatedly as children were added to the family. That they would have a specific type of education that she had decided she didn't want anymore. And they allowed my older son to live with her, which was fine because, as is the case with adopted children and blended families, they don't always blend quite the way you hope they do. And a very traumatized foster child being adopted and pushed into the older child role doesn't always work. And it really didn't, still hasn't. And he carried a lot of past issues with him. He needed to be alone some because he's just one of those kids who does better when he's the center of attention and when he's more focused on and not thrown into a pack of children. And I began to see a little bit of healing after that. She was ordered to pay child support for 1 child since She had one, I had one, and there was one extra. So she paid child support for one child when she felt like it. And by the time 10 months had expired, she had finished the 3-year degree that we had moved to that area for. She wanted a job and couldn't find one in that particular area. She wanted to move to 7 hours out of that particular area into New England. I'm from New England originally, and so I knew that that was not going to work very well with Uber. So when we got back to court after 10 months, I had healed some, but I still hadn't quite figured out how to communicate. And I'm not sure that I've yet figured out how to communicate with these court personnel. And we went back after 10 months because she wanted to move out of state. She wanted to take all 3 of the children. She had a house, she had a job, she had dogs, she had a new partner. She had everything that the courts look at to decide that this person is somehow worthy. Because they had previously not charged her with spousal abandonment, as the law actually required, there really wasn't anything stopping them from deciding that she was a better parent. She had way more than I could offer financially. I had started a program as well, miraculously got a special acceptance to a master's degree program without having a bachelor's degree to support it. And I was going to make that work. I was going to do that. And it was in it, and I was working full time. I was a full-time caregiver to 2 of my children. I was the chaperone for school trips. I was the classroom mom. You name it, I did it. And I was going to school on a master's degree level full time. It was not an easy season, but I had a lot of help from those who stepped in during a time of great trauma and conflict. And I'm so grateful for all those people. When that judge took a look at 10 months of stellar parenting, just like it had been the first time, she wouldn't listen. She wouldn't listen to anything that was said. People wrote letters from 4 or 5 other states and sent them in. She wouldn't read them to give character reference to me to show that though I didn't have any money, I was and always had been the bonded primary caregiver. In the end, she sold all of my children to my spouse so that she could move 7 hours away. I was given 1 weekend a month to drive halfway to meet my children and stay with them in a hotel. And I said, oh, hell no. Overnight, I started submitting job applications. My dad's on a computer looking for housing. My mom's on a computer checking out this, that, and the other. And I said, Mom, I need to go up there. I need to scout this out. I think I'm supposed to follow them. If she's gonna take my children, I'm gonna be as close as I can possibly get. In less than a week, I had 3 job interviews and housing set up with a contract signed for a rental house that was $200 more than the rent that was draining every dime that I made. Moving an urban job like Uber from the #1 Uber rideshare city in the nation to a farm field was really, really risky.
Yeah,
But
I imagine.
But
so.
Guess what? Just a little spoiler alert. I've been here for almost 2 years with that abusive judicial chaos representing my family life, and I haven't been evicted. I've not been late for rent once, even with the COVID chaos. Somehow, I always get
That's
to
amazing.
that month with that little bit left to make it work.
That's not somehow. You know what that is. You might as well claim it and receive it.
It is beyond a shadow of a doubt providence. It is not something that I can do on my own. So when I showed
Right.
up back to the judge a week later, I told her, I'm moving up there. I said, I am uprooting everything. I left my residency for my academic program. I left my school of choice, which was the school that had helped me get into an online program. Left my church, which was my ordaining a governing body that doesn't exist in New England. They're not up here, so I had to start all over with that process. Years of service, years of work, just completely thrown away. Because if you're taking my children, I'm going to live there. And I do. I live 2 miles away from my children. But here's what the judge did when she found out that I was moving to be near my children. Instead of 1 week in the month with my children living with me, she gave me 3 hours on Wednesday and every other weekend, but they're not allowed to spend the night with me. There was never any grounds for that to take place, but that was the vindictive response of a judge, someone who's actually in place of enforcing laws, if laws even exist. And so they have
Retaliation.
rooms set up in my house with their beds and their toys and their clothes that I update every 6 to 8 months like a good mom should. But they haven't spent the night in their own beds in almost 2 years. We can't go camping. We can't visit my family because they live far enough away that we can't go and come in an 8-hour day.
That's horrible. I mean,
See
that's absolutely
their
horrible.
uncles, their aunts, their cousins. It's terrible. It's absolutely horrendous.
It's retaliation. That's what that is. She seemed intimidated, the fact that you were willing to move from one area, abrupt your lifestyle that you've already, come so far to gain for your children. And it seemed like the judge was very intimidated by those actions. You carry strength, and that is one thing I will definitely notice with the family court is they don't like when they knock you down. That's exactly where they want you, is they want you left knocked down. They don't anticipate for us to, stand up on our 2 feet and go, we're going to push a little further.
In my next book, I'm writing down not just the narrative, not just the story, but the lessons I've learned along the way that are both spiritual and practical that I'm hoping are going to help other parents going through this. One of the lessons I learned early on in that after that 10 months time when I was really just kicking ass at life and trying my best to raise my children in a less than stellar environment, I had a guardian ad litem assigned to me. And I wrote in my second book that has yet to be published, don't do anything by yourself. You need a witness for everything that those types of people are involved in. She walked into my house and spent 3 hours with my children, walked alone with my older son, who told many, many lies, as angry adolescents are prone to do. And she saw my daughter climb a tree. She saw my daughter cross the road, by the way, a cul-de-sac, a neighborhood cul-de-sac, while I was standing in the front yard, and went back and told the court that I was dangerous for my children because they were climbing trees and crossing roads. Just ridiculous.
How dare them be children? Oh my goodness.
And I actually said in court, I'm so sorry your children grew up in so much concrete and video games that they never got to climb trees. I get just a little bit snarky with those people, and it probably didn't help the situation any, but it's really hard not to be sarcastic.
I'm sure it felt a little good, though, to add that tidbit of information in there for them, though.
So with the great crimes of tree climbing and crossing roads, I lost custody of my own biological daughter to someone who has no relation, had no legal relation to the child. And I couldn't believe it.
For them climbing trees and playing and crossing, really?
No.
That is just mind-boggling.
One other matter that needs to be addressed is religious discrimination. In the first court, I was accused of mental insanity because I prayed in public. I prayed in public in such a way during a very traumatic issue. The very day she had thrown me out, the very day she had taken my children early from their preschool. And I saw people who posed to be family friends, people who told me before the move, this is going to be good for your family. It's going to be good for your family to move up here. They took my children and escorted them into my home where my name was on the lease contract, and they wouldn't even allow me to say goodbye. I have this traumatic memory of reaching out to my daughter and people taking her into that building with her, reaching out to me, mommy, screaming my name.
That's horrible.
She was 3 years old at the time, barely weaned, to be honest with you. And that was the first separation we'd ever had. She never spent the night away from me. She slept in my bed. I fell to the ground and I began to pray in Hebrew, as is common for Davidic prayers. I remember daveting, which is keeping rhythm with psalms where you're moving back and forth. And I suppose to some, this rhythmic method of movement may look a little bit insane. And I'm speaking Hebrew, so they don't know what I'm saying. And that is the reason why they decided that I was insane. So when I got to New England, I had to pay 2.5 months gross business income to buy a psychological evaluation, which repeatedly says, I see no conflicts with parenting. I see no problems with parenting.
You did all of that. And, we might have lost her. I'm not sure, but she did. Oh,
Yet another
you're
court
back.
As I got to New England and had to pay 3.5 gross months income to buy a psychological evaluation to prove what anybody could have told them if they'd been bothered to listen. I lost $15,000 in loan money to yet another court monkey who couldn't manage to get that psychological evaluation entered in time.
So you hired a lawyer and they couldn't even bother to submit your psychological evaluation in time. That cost you all that money.
That is correct.
That
is correct.
That is apt.
I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand why she was held accountable for that. That doesn't make any sense. It's so it's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Do you want the rest of the story? 2 months after we all got to New England,
we're listening.
I'm 2 miles away from my children, and the former spouse says, I need to meet with you in person. Oh, I've learned my lesson. So I call a pastoral counselor and a good friend of mine, and I say, I need to sit down with this person. Here's just a little bit of the backstory. I need you present. And she tells me that my younger daughter, at the age of 5, outcried against sexual abuse allegations of the oldest child at the time, age around 13, 14, and that CPS was involved, that the boys were being grilled by the police to find out who did something, and the child was going to go through psychological play therapy to find out. I sat in a room sometime after that with DFS. They call it Department of Family Services in this area, which is comparable to CPS, DFS. There's all these different acronyms.
Okay.
So Department of Fucked Up Services had this meeting with my daughter and decided that what she said was true, that they couldn't prove who had done something to her, but there was in fact 2 different locations under this other parent's supervision where something had occurred of a sexual nature, and they marked it as sexual molestation. And so
was she ever seen by a doctor? Like, did the doctors indicate this?
I think at that point it would have been too late. She would have been as young as the age of 4 and the age of 5 when this did occur. Oh. And both times, I have to say this again, I need you to hear it. Both times were not in my house. See, in July of 2019, when the judge decided to sell my children to the supposed better parent, I told the judge, I said, I've never, because they asked me, they said, well, somebody said, that somebody not there, of course, somebody said you left your children alone at night to go work, because I did work nights. I said, no, that never happened. You have no testimony. You have no witness. You have no secondary witness. That never happened. I've not only never left my children at home at night alone, I've never left my children alone in the same room in broad daylight. My older son needs help. He needs help. Can you get some help for him? I didn't go into details. They didn't need to know his past, and I won't go into the details here, because a person's past will never speak to their future. But as a parent for many years of traumatized children, I know when there is the potential of problem. And I knew that there were some signs that were very concerning to me. And if my son or daughter, the younger 2, walked into the same room with the older child, I would turn off the burner and I'd be on their heels. They never were in the presence of anyone without me there, unless that person was ultra trusted. And I did have one of my dear friends who stayed with them, and I paid her the meager amount that I could. Some nights I made less than I paid her to stay with them. But I only knew that you work hard if you want to make a life for yourself. And that's what I had to do. It was never a time I left them alone. So when we got to the point that they were saying my biological daughter, who was never a foster child, who never went through trauma, who was breastfed and carried in the Moby Rat for 2.5 years, okay, that my little girl had been offended in such a way, it drove a deep pain in my heart that has not left. And I don't think that it ever will. Even if this injustice is rearranged, I don't think that pain will ever cease. I really don't think that it will. Because now I realize this is the reality of what divorce and spousal abuse does to our children. This is how our children are raised. 2 hours away from their mother. But when she's going 2 miles away from their mother, but when she's going through something this deep and this serious, they just push it under the rug. I looked straight at that DFS worker's face and I said, when are you going to take my child out of that house? And she said, oh, we're not going to do that. So they put the children in sexual therapy, including the older child who had deep need of sexual therapy. Remember, I had begged the judge previously to help him. They put her in sexual therapy. And then a year later, it was all over. And they're still living in that exact same environment with that exact same supervision.
Can I ask what you mean it was all over? I mean, if there was an incident that happened sexually and they just pushed it under the rug, how do they assume that it's all over with? Because it doesn't seem like the problem was resolved. They're still staying in that same environment.
I think you'd have to ask them that.
It's just, it's mind blowing. I can't understand and fathom. Have you heard of any other recent incidents with the children?
I was told I'm not allowed to talk to my children about this.
Really? Wow.
So as a parent, you're not, I mean, not saying that you would lead on leading questions. They don't come to you and say, with any concern about any recent, not that I'm saying that you would question them, but I mean, kids innocently, when something traumatic happens, usually goes to parents and says, listen, I got to sit down and I got to talk to you about something, or however the conversation goes.
She did. And they did nothing. So they have done exactly what they want to do. They have trained a college-age girl to just lay there and take it. They've trained a little girl to know that if you go to your parents and you tell the truth, nobody's going to listen to you anyway.
That's heartbreaking. Honestly.
How's your relationship with them right now, may I ask?
I have a hard time adapting to being forced into a different culture because this is not my culture. My parents are still married nearly 50 years. I come from a large sibling group. We were homeschooled much of the time, a little bit dorky and nerdy and definitely religious differences from the mainstream American culture, but I was safe and I was nurtured. And the reason why I stopped foster parenting years ago is because I just couldn't balance those children's problems with my children's problems. I didn't know how to protect my children and help the other children. I never suspected in those early years that my children would become the traumatized children that I was actually trying to get away from. So where does that leave us now? I filed paperwork in a new state, pro se, because I have no collateral left. And I hope that somebody here listens. That's where we're at. Every time the children have to be taken away, we have a little timer that's set 15 minutes early. And when it goes off, my daughter starts crying. She says, Mommy, I want to stay. She holds on to me the way that she held on to me that day in July of 2019 when she was torn from my arms to the point that I had claw marks on the back of my neck for 3 weeks. 3 weeks that I wasn't allowed to see my children because the other person decided that the judge's orders started after Labor Day. And I look at my little girl in those moments and I just tell her, we have to keep praying. We have to keep praying and we have to keep hoping. And I'll tell you what I tell her. I tell her injustice is temporary. The Constitution is not. And we know from such projects.
Definitely.
We know from such projects like the Innocence Project, who helps people escape from decades of false imprisonment. You never get that time back. But if you wait long enough and you work hard enough, the truth will set you free. And that's my prayer. And that's my hope. And that's what I'm trying to plant a seed in my children, is that one day they will know the truth and they'll be set free.
And typically that's usually what happened. I just had a conversation with one of my other dear friends, and it was very similar to, your ending quote that you just stated. And it's very true, because children have this bond, with their parents that, it doesn't matter what entity from the outside is going to try to take that. There's always going to be an emotion inside that child that wants to draw near back to that parent, whatever dramatic situation had happened. Sometimes it's unfortunate. Sometimes it's very fortunate that, the child wants to engage back into a relationship with the parent. But, like I was telling my friend the other day, where we have situations like this, like such as yourself, those children sooner or later do become adults, and they do start understanding their own emotions in the world, how the world, works around them. How you have emotions that are positive and negative, and there's going to be a point in time that the child is going to want to know the full truth, and they're going to want to seek after the proper people and the ones that are willing to sit down and say, listen, like you said, although this time was missed, all we can do is look towards the future and continue to establish a proper relationship amongst each other, because no matter how much someone tries to sever those ties, that love and that bond that a parent has will never dissipate unless that parent themselves is willing to relinquish those feelings. You know what I mean?
Right. And I also want my children to know that they can be the ones who stop this cycle. They don't have to treat their spouse this way. They don't have to treat their children this way. The pain that they experience in their childhood can be where it stops. And I'm trying to plant that seed in them as well, that the relationship they see in my parents is a relationship that they can emulate. They can attain to that. They can have a faithful, long-lasting, respectful relationship. And that's hard for children to see when they don't see it. But I need them to begin visioning that for themselves.
Well, like you said, you're planting a seed for them, which is wonderful. Because although, again, like I said, they don't understand the same feelings as we do as adults, sooner or later, because of that little seed that you had, blessed them with, they'll grow into it. They'll figure out what's right, what's wrong, and they'll blossom not only from what you have taught them, but they'll blossom into their own personality, their own character traits, everything else that makes them who they are as a person. You know what I mean? Right. So it's very effective. Some people don't feel that it is at such a young age, but you're 100% right. That seed alone will, blossom into a beautiful thing, and it will take that trauma and hopefully not only, teach them as a person how to survive and go through the same struggles, but they'll be able to look at this experience and grow in strength, and probably come out 10 times better than originally what we had even thought of. You know what I mean?
And that's exactly what happened after the book was published. I started getting calls from complete strangers saying, that happened to me, or this happened to me, and that's why I started the social media platform, Erased Moms Chaplain, because I had so many people pouring truth into me through through religion and through spirituality, and so many other moms don't have that. So many other full-time dads don't have that. When they're expected overnight to make triple income to pay the person who is alienating them from their child, they really need somebody to talk to. And I can't say that I'm the best chaplain for this job, but I've stepped up to the plate, and I've done that because I need other people to realize that you can vision something better for yourself, even if you never get your children back. You know, I had two I lost to suicide this past year in 2020, and I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm going to do everything I can to reach these parents and let them know that you can vision a better life for yourself. Just because they tried to kill you and drive you insane does not mean that's how you're going to end up. You have to make a conscious choice to envision something better for yourself.
So Terry, actually, go ahead, Brandon. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I just said I agree. We do have a couple people with questions. If that would be okay, real quick, Tina. If you just want to say what you want to say, real quick, Tina, and then we can get to questions.
Oh, sure. Okay, I'm so sorry. Terry, I just wanted to throw out there real quick. What you're saying is absolutely wonderful, and it's crazy because I just had a conversation with two women that I briefly became acquainted with, and they originally brought the idea to me. They're looking into a group, and I think you would be best fit. So after the show, I would like to introduce you to them, or maybe exchange information. They're looking for a platform to engage with parents that, such as ourselves, have went through traumatic experiences, and we're looking for a positive group, like AA basically would be. So I think you would actually definitely not only benefit but help this. This is great. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. You guys can finish.
We just had a couple questions from a woman watching on Facebook. Her name is Emmy. Her first question, she was wondering who the judge was. Again, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, especially if it's still litigation.
It is not currently in that state. Remember, the judge sold the children to be moved out of state. It was in Alexandria City. The name of the judge is Lisa B. Kemmler. I am one in a list of 16 right now. So anyone who has seen that judge and been abused by that judge, I am very interested in helping you get in touch, not with me, because I'm not a legal person, okay? I will talk to you, I will listen to you, I will pray with you, I will sit with you, I will go to court with you, I will do everything I can, but I'm not legal, okay? There are those who are working in that regard. So if that name sounds familiar, please do reach out and I'll get you in touch with Judiciapedia, which is something that many people need to know about, where you can record your case, the name of the judge, the name of the guardian, the name of the other court minions, and all the bullies involved. Judiciapedia is something that everyone needs to be a part of so that we can hold these judges accountable.
I
just found out about that last night.
So I can remember that.
I actually just found out about, I don't know if this is the same Emmy that I spoke to yesterday, but because I can't see who's logging in. But the woman that I was talking to about the group that wants to start, partnering up with the other woman, she actually just told me about it because I'm like, well, is this the same thing as like the Judicial Committee? And she goes, no, you've done a lot of research on there. And I'm like, it amazes me how many resources are out there, but it's not open to the public. They're not willing to share with us because then they would figure, oh, well, we would definitely stand up and definitely fight back if we had the power, and we had the resources and knowledge too. Amazing.
And one of the reasons why there's a lot of resources that we don't know about is because there's not a lot of unity in this group. I've tried very hard in tonight's message and in any message I present to say parents, moms, and dads, parents, gender neutral, not just because it's LGBTQ month and I'm gay. Newsflash, I'm gay. I do that. I do that because the gender wars are tearing us apart. The gender wars are killing our movement. If we are going to see justice, we're going to have to stop hurling this as an all women's issue or an all men's issue. It's an issue, okay? It's an issue. It's a legal issue.
It's divide and conquer.
Issue. Yes, we have to stop the gender wars because we need to know about these resources and we need to work together.
No, absolutely. Emmy had one more question. She said ours were taken May 23rd, 2019. She was curious when yours were taken.
July 2019.
Oh, here we go. We have another comment from Libby. I can pull it on the screen here. Getting goosebumps due to all the brave parents and amazing people who are getting loud about this. Absolutely.
Yes,
definitely. And that's
Now,
why
this is-
testimony is key. That's why we're talking about people bringing their stories out, because it's going to
Yes.
help so many other parents that are scared and intimidated. You know, we may
That's
not
right.
legally be able to do anything for each other, but we definitely can lean on each other and let each other know we're not alone. We're not alone in this fight.
Exactly. Let's look at the Black Lives Movement and recognize that that organization started many, many, many years before they were well known, before they were publicized, and before they got to the point that they were listened to. So you have to tell your story. You have to be careful. You have to be kind. You need to find a way to do it professionally. Get somebody to listen to your story before you start telling it, because you do need to be careful. And there were some questions tonight that were left unanswered. There's a reason for that. I still have to be careful. But the truth of the matter is, if we don't speak of injustice, injustice will continue to destroy lives, and they will continue to profit from generations of traumatized children.
And I've said this many times before, and I'm going to keep saying it. They try to make it seem as if it's a generational curse. And in actuality, it's not. It's not us that's doing it. It's them harassing us through our generation. That's pretty much what it is.
So sorry. I just want to get to a couple comments real quick.
We're going to have to do it really quick because I'm almost out of time, and the herd is knocking.
Okay. So the other one I can just talk Tina about later. So this comment's from Mary Covis. I pulled it on the screen. 16 years alienated, July 2005. Now, as my teenage children were used to lie to the police and had me falsely arrested, never seeing them again. Now, 16 years later, my ex brought them back to court saying I want nothing to do with them and is suing me for $101,000. Trial set for December.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm never surprised when I hear about any of this. Let's reach out on social and let's be friends. I'm not the least bit surprised.
So absolutely.
I know another mother's faced the same judge. She ended up in jail for asking her pediatrician about her child's medication after the child was sold to the abuser.
Wow.
Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Wow. So
they need to be held accountable, basically. That's what we need to change. Accountability.
I love you all. I do have to go.
No, thank you so much for joining us. I will be in touch. You are
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Person.
Keep in touch. God bless.
Injustice is temporary. The Constitution is not.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Oh, all right, guys. So thank you for joining us today. Emmy, I believe this is the Emmy you were talking to, Tina, because she has said a number of things. She asked if you could message her later on. There's a lot of comments. It's hard for me to keep track.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. As we were on live, I was actually adding more groups because like I told you, I figured out how to do it. So yeah. I'm a little excited about that. So hopefully we pulled in a little bit more viewers this time.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We will be back in 2 weeks. And of course, my regular Rips Reports viewers, regular stream starting again this week now that the studio is done. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a great night. I love you all.
Good night.
Yeah, I don't wanna fall asleep, I don't wanna pass away. I've been thinking of our future cause I'll never see those days. I don't know why this has happened, but I probably deserve it.